The SNP's Nicola Sturgeon joined us now. Nicola, thanks very much. Good afternoon to you.
Hello.
What do you make of your performance so far? I'm looking at the Scotland scoreboard that we have here, and I'm going to show it to viewers now. And that's showing me that the SNP so far are on 350 seats, council seats. They've lost 17. The Tories have surged by 142 seats so far to 250. They're clearly now in second place, with Labour in third, having lost 103. How would you describe the SNP's performance there?
Oh, I'm delighted. The SNP's won this election. We've got more votes, more seats. We are the largest party in more councils than any other party in Scotland. It's a clear and emphatic victory for the SNP. We're the largest party in all of Scotland's four biggest cities: Edinburgh, Dundee, Aberdeen, and here in the city of Glasgow, where we have today ended 40 years of Labour control of Glasgow City Council. So this is a fantastic victory. In terms of the Tory support, that's come directly from Labour. It's not the SNP losing ground to the Tories. If you look at Labour and the Tories' support, they're almost a mirror image of each other, and I think the real soul-searching in Scotland today has to be done by the Labour Party. But for the SNP, I'm delighted. It's yet another clear election victory, and of course it's a great springboard for the general election just a few weeks from now.
John Curtis was telling us earlier that your performance as a party is not as strong as it was in 2015 or 16, and he also pointed out that you had a realistic expectation of taking control of Glasgow City Council. So why didn't that happen?
Well, we, as John Curtis well knows, we have proportional representation for Scottish council elections, single transferable vote. So majorities are actually the exception, not the rule. And what we set out to do was win Glasgow, and we have won Glasgow. And in terms of the comparison with 2015 and 2016, it's not comparing like with like. You know, those were parliamentary elections. This is a council election. So the SNP vote has held up, our share of the seats have held up, and of course we will be the largest party in more councils, perhaps a majority of councils, although that's not absolutely clear yet. So there is no way that anybody can spin this result as anything other than a clear and very emphatic win for the SNP. And it puts us in pole position to protect local services the length and breadth of the country, and of course gives us a great springboard for the general election, where it's now clear, on the basis of what's happened in England, that the Tories are on track to win the general election. So if people in Scotland want strong voices and a strong opposition to the Tories, then that can only come from the SNP.
You keep on saying clear and emphatic, and I'm wondering how that squares with the outcome in Dundee, where you lost overall control there.
We're one seat short of overall control in Dundee, and I come back to the point that, you know, people who pay close attention to elections will understand we have single transferable vote for council elections in Scotland, proportional representation. So majorities are not usual, they are the exception, not the rule. There may well be no council in Scotland that has majority control after this election, but we are the largest party in not just Dundee but Aberdeen, Edinburgh, Glasgow, a whole host of other councils across the country. So, you know, in very simple terms, the SNP is going to emerge from this election with more votes than any other party by some distance, with more seats than any other party, and in the driving seat of more councils than any other party. And, you know, by anybody's standards, in anybody's language, that is a pretty clear, emphatic win for the SNP in this election.
Just bear with us, Nicola, if I may, because we've just got North Lanarkshire in. I just want to show viewers that. So North Lanarkshire is a hand council, 33 to your party, the SNP, 32 to Labour, 10 to the Conservatives, 2 to the Independents. So let's look at the change from last time. This is North Lanarkshire. You've gained 3 for the SNP, Labour have lost 12, and the Tories, again, this is a pattern we've seen quite a lot of, the Tories have gained 10 seats on North Lanarkshire Council. Again, just to go back to your reasoning about why the Conservatives are making quite a few inroads here. John Nicholson, your colleague earlier, was telling us that, you know, was in effect complaining that he thought Ruth Davidson had just gone on and on and on about the concept of the Constitution and an independence referendum. And it was put to him that that strategy has clearly worked in lots of these areas. What do you say?
Well, in a sense, and I think North Lanarkshire actually illustrates my point very well. It's not the only council to do so. And North Lanarkshire, incidentally, a bit like Glasgow, is a council that, you know, they used to weigh the Labour vote in. The SNP is now the largest party. But again, if you look at North Lanarkshire just as a case in point there, the SNP has improved its standing. And what you see is almost a mirror image of Labour and the Conservatives. The Labour have vote and seats have fallen and the Tories have gone up. So the questions about the Tory performance, with the greatest of respect, are not really questions for me, because it's not the SNP that has lost ground to the Tories. The questions about the Tories' support are questions for Labour, because what we have seen in Scotland, and of course we saw the start of this in the Scottish Parliament election last year, is a collapse in the Labour vote, and that is where the Tories are picking up their support. It's not coming from the SNP, because the SNP continues to be strong and continues to be winning these elections.
No, understood, but we're interested in your view on it. Clearly, First Minister, bear with us, because John McDonnell is here, and just your thought on why the First Minister thinks Labour's vote has suffered in parts of Scotland.
Well, I think Nicola should be worried at the moment, because the SNP surge has now clearly come to a halt. And whatever she's saying at the moment, they were expecting to take Glasgow overall. They were expecting much greater gains than this. And I think what it reflects is an increasing rejection of any concept of a further independence referendum. And those votes have gone to the Tories, of course, and I'm disappointed at Labour's position in a number of areas. But it means the SNP, as I say, the SNP surge that we've seen in past years has now come to a halt. They're beginning to fall back, and I think that's a rejection of any concept of a further independence referendum.
Sal Bridget?
I think that's certainly right. I think that the SNP have been going backwards, and it is absolutely clear, talking to colleagues in Scotland, and I was up there myself a couple of weeks ago, that the Conservatives' literature was full of no to IndyRef2, and I'm sure that that has been reflected as well in the seats that have been won and lost over.
Ian Duncan-Smith?
Well, you know, it was the First Minister herself who, before this election, made a big issue about independence referendum. She was the one that put it on the table. She was the one that actually called for it and told Theresa May she wanted it ASAP. And so I don't think when the Scottish Nationalists complain about there being some kind of issue here about the referendum that they have any ground to stand on, because they were the ones that raised this as the single issue that they felt was important in Scotland. So I absolutely think it's the right legitimate tactic to use, but also if you look at lots of other literature there on the ground, you'll find that it was often about local issues as well. I think this is a huge feather in the cap for Ruth Davidson. It's a personal leadership issue here, where I think she has generally become the person to take on the First Minister and the Scottish Nationalists, and is making real ground on this. So I think this is very good for balanced politics in Scotland.
First Minister, just a thought about your prospects as you see them in 5 weeks' time on June the 8th.
I'm looking forward to the general election, and I think the performance of the SNP today is a great springboard for that campaign, and I'll come back to that in a second. But let me, if I may, just pick up on a couple of the points I've been listening to. Now, the SNP fought this local election on local issues, but if the Tories want to say that it was a campaign about independence, then the Tories really have to face up to the fact that they put that centre stage, and the SNP have won this election in Scotland, and the Tories have lost it. And as far as John McDonnell is concerned, I mean, I know Labour doesn't have much to smile about in any part of the UK today, but Labour has seen its vote collapse in Scotland. Those in the Labour ranks who support independence have long since started to vote for the SNP, and now we see those who don't support independence going to the Conservatives. Labour is in a really sorry state. I'm standing here in a city that I've been politically active in for most of my adult life. They used to weigh the Labour vote in Glasgow, and now the SNP holds every Westminster constituency, every Scottish Parliament constituency, and we're now the largest party at council level, about to form an administration. But in terms of the general election, it's quite clear on the back of the English results that Theresa May is on course to win the election. What the question is for Scotland is, do we want to make sure there are strong voices for Scotland with an opposition that can hold the Tory government to account? It's clear that Labour can't do that. They're barely fit for opposition and certainly not fit for government. If you want that from Scotland, it can only come from the SNP, and I think that's a very good springboard as we go into the next few weeks leading up to June the 8th.
Just bear with us, First Minister. Peter, you're making a point.
I just want to make this point to you that 2 years ago, the vote for the SNP in the general election was greater than that of the three main unionist parties put together, Labour, Conservative and Liberal Democrat. Looking at these results, there's now, as of yesterday, a fairly substantial majority for the three unionist parties combined over the SNP. 4-3, 3-2, something like that, a reasonably substantial vote. Now, it may be very different in 5 weeks' time. But the question I'd like to ask Nicola Sturgeon, given first past the post, you're bound to come out with a clear majority of seats in Scotland. But if the vote for the unionist parties is substantially greater than the vote for the SNP, does that affect your thinking about another referendum?
No, it doesn't, but with the greatest respect, I'm focusing on winning the general election. We've just won the council election, so we're now focusing on winning the general election. But what I think is interesting, forgive me, there's a result just been declared here, so I'm not hearing very much at the moment. But it's quite interesting, isn't it, that we have other parties in Scotland right now who are, seeing the SNP win election after election after election, that are busy trying to redefine what victory and defeat means, because they know they can't win the election. So I'm going to continue to focus on getting more seats and more votes than any other party, and by any definition that will be the SNP continuing to win the election. I'm not taking anything for granted at the general election. We've got a campaign ahead, and part of the success of the SNP over the last decade has been not taking voters for granted, because we see in this city of Glasgow what happens to parties when they take the electorate for granted, as Labour has done over many years.
First Minister, we'll let you there, and thanks for battling against all the cheering in the background. Thank you very much.